And we are live.
Good morning. Welcome to the June 28th Durham Board of Adjustment meeting. Meeting will now come to order. My name is Jacob Rogers. I'm the chair of the board. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are conducting this meeting using a remote electronic platform as permitted by Session Law 2020-3. This is the second, this is not the second. This is the Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. The board typically conducts evidentiary hearings on requests for variances, special use permits, and other requests. Today's meeting will proceed much like an in-person meeting of the BOA. On the screen, you'll see members of the Board of Adjustment. Additionally, planning staff, representatives from the city and county's attorney's offices are attending the remote meeting. Applicants were required to register in advance and are also attending the remote meeting. When a case is called for its hearing, applicants and witnesses will be promoted within the platform so their video can be seen. The chair will swear in applicants and witnesses at the beginning of each case. Staff will present each case and applicants will then provide their evidence. Control of the presentation and screen sharing will remain with planning staff. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube site, and the link to this broadcast is on the website for the Board of Adjustment. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I would like to provide some important information about steps taken to ensure each party's due process rights are protected as we receive and proceed in this platform. Each applicant on today's agenda was notified that this meeting will be conducted using this remote platform. During registration, every applicant on today's agenda consented to the board conducting the hearing using this platform. We will also confirm today at the start of each hearing that the participants in the hearing consent to the matter proceeding in the platform. And if there are any objection to a matter proceeding in the platform, the case will be continued. Notice of today's meeting was provided by letters mailed to property owners and residents within 600 feet of subject properties, posting a sign at the property, posting a sign on the city's website. The website and mailed notices for today's meeting contained information about how the public can access the remote meeting as it occurs. These notices contained information about registration requirement for the meeting, along with other information about how to register. All individuals participating in today's hearings and evidentiary hearings were also required to submit a copy of any presentation, document, exhibit, or other materials that they wish to submit as part of the hearing prior to today's meeting. All materials that the city received from the participants in today's cases, as well as a copy of city staff's presentations and documents, were posted on the BOA website as part of the agenda. No new documents will be submitted during today's meeting. All decisions of this board are subject to appeal to the Durham Superior Court. Anyone in the audience other than the applicant who wishes to receive a copy of the formal order issued by this board on a particular case must submit a written request for a copy of the order. I'd like to ask now if would anybody like to disclose any ex parte communication and or any recusals from today's cases? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Terry, would you like to call roll?
Yes. Rogers.
Here.
Meadows.
Here.
Hushain.
Here.
Kip.
Here.
Paletta.
Here.
Retchless.
Here.
Tarrant. Major. Pickett.
Here.
Colassa.
Here.
Okay.
All right. Mike Tarrant has requested an excused absence. He requested this from me. He's out of town. Would there be a motion to excuse Mike Tarrant's absence from today's meeting?
Meadows, move that we excuse Mr. Tarrant from today's meeting.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Retchless. Terry, would you just go down the poll of everybody real quick?
Yeah. Kip.
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
Paletta.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
Retchless.
Yes.
Hushain.
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
Colassa.
Yes.
All right. Motion carried. Thank you for that. The next thing is, I know, Chad, you have to leave, I think, by 10:30. And anybody else have any early dismissals they want to, just in case, want to announce? All right. Next, there's no minutes to approve. I guess we'll approve those next at the July meeting for last week's meeting and this week's meeting, I'm assuming. But Terry, would you like to call the first case?
Are there any adjustments?
There are.
There are. Yes.
There are 2 adjustments to the agendas. Case B 21-00021 has been postponed to July. And we will also be voting on B 20-00022 Green Fleet Market order after today's hearing.
Great. All right.
Okay. First case is a county case. It's a request for a variance from the balloon test requirement for a wireless communication facility. The property is located at 5193 International Drive. It's zoned industrial light, and it's within the Suburban Development Tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time and notarized affidavits verifying sign postings and letter mailings are on file. Seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Bushane, and do I need to?
Major, Jessica Major.
Major. Okay. Is she here?
She is.
Yep. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So everyone who plans on giving testimony in this case will need your camera on. We're going to administer the oath, and I think we've got everybody here. So if you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Christopher Bernardo?
I do.
Mike Samfair? I'm sorry, sir, you were muted. You got to unmute. Yeah. I can tell you're saying yes.
I do.
All right. And Tom Johnson?
I do.
I don't see anybody else. Also, do you consent to this remote meeting platform, Tom?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Cole, am I turning this over to you?
Yes, that's correct.
We've heard part of this case a couple months ago. Or it seems
Correct. Correct. It is you probably leave. Good morning. I'm Cole Renninger, representing the Planning Department. Planning staff requests that the staff reports and all material submitted for all cases at this public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted. Thank you.
Case B 22-00011 is a request for variance from the balloon test requirements for a non-concealed wireless communication facility. The case area is highlighted in red. This site is in the Suburban Tier, zoned light industrial, and within the County of Durham's jurisdiction. The existing use is public service electric transformer. William Mullins Law Firm, agent for the property owner, submits a request for a variance from the balloon test requirement for a proposed freestanding non-concealed wireless communication facility located at 5193 International Drive. The subject site is zoned light industrial, located within the Falls News Jordan Lake Critical Area, FJA, and within the Suburban Tier per section 5.3.3 and 0.5 of the Unified Development Ordinance. A balloon test shall be required for all proposed WCFs that require a special use permit. The proposed non-concealed freestanding, commonly referred to as unipole, will require a special use permit per the use table. The balloon test is required to be performed prior to the minor special use permit process. Thus, the applicant is requesting the variance now, although neither the board or the staff has begun reviewing a site plan for the proposed unipole. The applicant is proposing to use photo simulations instead of a balloon test to simulate the height of the appearance of the WCF. The site includes an existing Duke Energy substation, and the applicant has provided evidence but conducting a balloon test at this location will not be allowed by Duke Energy, as they feel it puts the operation of the substation at risk. And I do have the applicant's presentation, but it looks like Chad has a question before we continue.
Yeah, I want to remind, this is one that we, a lot of the discussion, and Cole, remind me if it was last month or 2 months ago.
It was 2 months ago, sir.
That's what I thought. A lot of the discussion and the concern around the board members were that this photo test versus the balloon test. I'm sure the applicant is going to chat more about that, but it really went around that photo. So I just want to mention that kind of as a reminder for folks. Chad, you got a question for Cole?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Cole, what is the purpose for 5333N5C? What is the purpose for the balloon test?
So the balloon test is a city requirement to make sure. That's a good question. I might let the applicant answer that. It's to protect wind and stuff, but I'm not sure what it actually clarifies. Because I'm not an expert in cell towers, and I don't want to speak to something that I'm not an expert on.
Okay, my impression or my understanding of the code section was that the balloon test is required to provide surrounding residents with some sense about what they could expect the facility to look like.
I assume that's part of it, since the applicant is proposing to use photo simulation. I figure it's kind of to see the applicants where it is. But like they were saying, with weather balloon tests, it's wind and everything can vary where it goes. So the cell tower, that's why they're using photo simulations. So that would be my understanding too. But like I said, I'll let the experts speak on that more when they present their case.
Jessica,
Mr. Meadows, this is Jessica Dockery from the Planning Department. You are correct. It is to provide a visual representation of the height and location of the tower.
Thank you.
all
David,
right.
I see you have a question. Mr. Paletta.
Well, could you clarify what documents are in this record?
Yeah, so this record they have submitted a presentation. That's applicant presentation that will be under the record, as well as
I checked the website yesterday. I did not see anything other than the 18-page report that staff submitted. So if there's something new, where is it?
I guess I'm going to present it in a second. If it's not there, I'm not sure why.
And Cole, you're talking about the applicant's presentation, not yours, right?
That's correct, because this is my presentation.
That's right. David, I'm sure the applicant's about to go over it. Dave, you have any other questions for Cole, though? No?
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Cole, rather specifically? All right. We'll turn it over to the applicant. Tom, I'm assuming that you're going to be presenting.
I am, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to go over the fact that this was a continuation from last time, that the application and associated documents plus this presentation that I'm getting ready to go over were all on the record at the prior hearing. So there's nothing new from that. As I understood it, the reason we continued it is to have Mr. Sampair appear, who prepared the photo simulations, because there were some questions about the preparation of those that the board had. So as far as new documentation, there really isn't. It's the same documentation that was presented 2 months ago and is part of the record and was admitted into the record. I'm happy to go over, these photo simulations that were done. Yes, it is correct that the purpose of the balloon test is to give an idea of the appearance and height of the tower, but as we discussed at the prior meeting, the photo simulations do the same thing and can do the same thing for whatever location anyone wants to see them. So, if we typically do them in the directions of north, south, east, west, but if there's a particular property owner that has a concern, we can do that. We've actually done this in this situation in anticipation of applying for the special use permit, but they can be done from as many locations as you can with the balloon test. But as we discussed earlier, the balloon tests are adversely affected by wind. And in this case, the balloon test will not work because it's next to a Duke Energy substation, and the risk to the substation is something that Duke is unwilling to allow to occur. So that's why we're doing photo simulations, but actually photo simulations provide a better picture than, a tether and a balloon at the top. They actually provide a view of what the tower will look like once constructed. Let me go through this presentation again. I did that last time. I'll go through that, and then I'll have Mr. Sampair speak to it a little bit. So if I could go to the next slide. So this is a location of the tower adjoining an existing Duke Energy substation with power poles that already exist in the area, electric transmission lines. Next slide. Again, this is with some topographic and overlay information regarding the site, the access road, and is showing where that will go to the tower. Next slide. These are the locations from which we did some sample photo simulations. Again, we can do more or less in preparation for the special use permit as may be requested. Our request here is just a variance to allow the photo simulations as opposed to the balloon test. Next slide. Again, this is just more of those locations. The NV means not visible. So from that one location, the tower was not visible because of existing vegetation. Next slide. Okay, this is a view from location 1, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner. Next slide. And this is what the tower will look like on from the photo simulation from location 1. Next slide. Again, this is from location 2 on International Drive. Next slide. And this is the tower as it would appear from this location, again, predominantly obscured by existing vegetation. Next slide. This is from location 3, further down the road. Next slide. And you can see the tower as indicated by the red arrow. Because of the distance, we added the arrow in order to be able to spot where the tower will be. Next slide. Okay, the location from which this is not visible, Mr. Sampair actually superimposed a depiction of where the tower would be in relation to the existing vegetation as to why it's not visible. So that's the yellow depiction that you see here. Next slide. Or that may be it. Yeah, that's the last slide. So, these are the photo simulations. Now, these are, keep in mind, these are done, even though a balloon test is done, the photo simulations are done as part of the balloon test. So there would be access to photo simulations on top of the balloon test. But as we discussed at the prior meeting, the technology is such that you can locate and mathematically determine the appearance and size of the tower from given locations without the necessity of having the balloon. Are there any questions at this point?
Chad, you have one?
I do. Please, thank you, sir. I want to be clear that I recognize that this is an industrial zoning district and it's it's a substation. So I'm not wound up around the axle with respect to the use or the location. I'm concerned about the due process associated with the variance request. The balloon test calls for this this evidence to be in place for 4 hours with a 2-week notice period for adjacent affected residents and a sign posting. And what's proposed instead of that 4-hour time period and mailed notice and posting is a series of photo simulations that are being presented at this meeting. And so I'm hoping that you can spend some time in your arguments explaining how and in what ways this process protects the due process, the required notice under the UDO. The balloon test requirements allow this balloon test. You've testified that Duke won't allow the balloon test on the site, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about why that is so. The standards do want the balloon stabilized for wind. So assumedly, this balloon is not going to be bouncing around in the wind because you're supposed to stabilize it for that anyway. I expect you'll use a crane to put the balloon in place. I'm pretty sure you'll need to use a crane to put the tower in place. So I'm confused about how we can use a crane to put the tower up, but we can't use a crane to use the balloon. And then finally, the standards allow the test to take place, not necessarily in the proposed location, but within 50 feet or so. So I'm hoping that you'll provide some evidence about why you were unable to locate in a slightly different location to do this balloon test. So those are my questions that I would like to hear some more information about. Thank you.
And if I may, I'd like to address those questions. Try to do them one by one. I may need Mr. Meadows to remind me of his questions because there were several questions there. So number one, in terms of due process, we're more than willing to notify adjoining property owners and send samples, a photo simulation from their location and get them to ask for additional simulations that they may want. This wouldn't be dependent on any particular time of day. I mean, this would be something they could look at for as long as they wanted to, and it would accurately depict the location and appearance and height of the tower. So, we're glad as part of the process, and if it wants to be part of the variance, to notify the adjoining property owners, as would normally be done with a balloon test, to provide sample photo simulations from those locations of those property owners so that they can see it. The process with the balloon is not with a crane in terms of lifting the balloon. A balloon is done, it's tethered to the ground with a rope that then the balloon floats at the top of that rope. So at any time, it's very rare you won't have any wind at all. But there's always the risk that wind could come and blow it into the wires. And this is a substation, but it's not the substation in and of itself, but there are wires going to transmission lines all around this location. And that's what the risk is. So even at 50 feet away from the proposed tower location, you're still getting into a risk of wind, or for some reason the balloon releases and could cause risk to the to the power lines. So that's why the concern was raised by Duke. As far as a crane and constructing the tower, obviously a crane has much more control than a tethered balloon that would be subject to potential wind gusts that could cause a problem. I don't think the ordinance, as I read it, requires it to be dead still. There's always going to be some wind that affects a balloon test no matter what you do. There are times at which you can do it where it'll be less windy. But the thing about a balloon test is it's just a red balloon at the top of a rope. It gives you an idea of potentially the height of the tower, assuming that the balloon is floating straight up, but it doesn't give you an idea of the actual appearance of the tower during that time frame, because you've just got a thin rope as opposed to the tower itself. So the photo simulations are much more accurate in depicting what the tower will look like. I hope that's answered all the questions, Mr. Meadows. If I missed something, let me know.
Tom, and right
Yeah,
here,
thank you.
The neighbors of this property, I mean, 2 months ago when we heard this case, it was read in the record that the neighbors were notified of the hearing, and it had to have happened at least 3 or 4 weeks prior to that hearing. So for 3 months, and there were pictures included in these same images, excuse me, were included in 2 months ago the case, correct, Tom?
Yeah, that's correct. No, these notices, we did simulations, and that was all part of our application package. It went to these adjoining landowners.
That's right.
I can have Mr. Bernardo also relate discussions he's had with an adjoining property owner, and the efforts we went to, because this matter has been pending for a very, very long time, probably about a year. And we were doing photo simulations for that adjoining landowner to satisfy that adjoining landowner's concern. So we did multiple simulations for that landowner, which Mr. Bernardo can address. And he can also address the concerns of Duke Energy because of his direct discussions with Duke Energy. So I can ask him to speak to that at the appropriate time. But yes, you are correct.
And if I'm correct, and Cole or Jessica, tell me if I'm not. I don't believe there were any opposition that attended the meeting 2 months ago, and I don't believe there's any opposition to this case today or any of the adjoining property owners. Is that correct?
That's correct. But just before Mr. Bernardo speaks, I will say that since Duke Energy is not here to speak on their behalf or neither of the neighbors, that testimony is considered hearsay.
Understand.
Just a reminder.
Chad,
I would like to say in response to that this is not judicial. It's by nature quasi-judicial. So there's a lot of documentation that's submitted that may not be like you here in a court. But go ahead, Jacob.
No, thanks, Tom. Chad, did we get all of your questions there? I want to make sure.
Yes, I do have one more question, and I appreciate the information and the discussion for the purposes of the record. The one last question I would ask, I did not realize that the balloon was actually tied to a rope, and I can certainly understand how that would cause some concern. Is it possible for the applicant to explain some alternative ways to get the balloon into the air rather than tethered to a rope?
I mean, I guess conceivably there could be other ways. I'd like at the appropriate time to have Mr. Sampere just kind of speak to that overall process, since he's done this a great deal and can speak to the issues with the balloon test versus the photo simulations.
All right, I think we'll get there very soon. Chad, that was all you had, right? I see you, Dave. I'm about to call. All right, David.
I'm trying to determine what documents are in the record, and I'm looking at the document that Mr. Johnson just put up. The page in front of me is view from location 4, and down at the bottom I noticed it says revision 2022-0611. This is different from the document included. This is a different date from the document included in the staff's packet. It's also different date from the document included in Mr. Johnson's original submission. So I think I don't think this is in the record. I just want clarification. What's in the record? What's in the record?
All right. Go ahead, Jessica.
And I would like to add a request that what I just presented be admitted into the record.
This is Jessica Dockery, the planning department. That was going to be my recommendation. It does appear this is slightly different from what we had. It actually has more information and clearer photos. So it is a better source of information. And I would recommend that you all consider accepting it. It is very similar, but slightly different.
Brian, do I need a vote on that, or can
well, even before we have a vote, could we have an explanation from staff why we were not provided this before the meeting? I have raised that question on numerous occasions, and it happened repeatedly. And we can't be prepared unless we see things ahead of time. This is a question for staff. So when did staff get it, and why were we not provided it?
It seems like we got it some time ago, and we did upload it to our SharePoint, but it's come to our understanding that you guys don't have access to that. So we should have been updated online on the agenda.
And Cole, I have raised this question with you directly at least twice, I think 3 times. When will this problem get fixed so we can be prepared for the meeting?
So David, most of the time, and when we're in person, applicants can bring evidence in that you haven't seen in your packet.
We are not in person today, and this has been raised 2 or 3 times, and the problem is going on again.
I understand it's an issue, and we can talk about it all the time, but I don't think it's appropriate to discuss planning's inefficiencies at the meeting. But I'll be happy to talk with you after the meeting or before, and we can try to resolve this question
Well-
more efficiently.
Actually, we were supposed to talk and I never heard from you.
Well, we'll get,
Okay.
let's table that discussion for later in the meeting. Certainly we'll get to it.
Maybe as new business?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, do I have to have a vote to accept this into the record?
No, I think as chair, you can make the decision as to whether or not it's acceptable. I think since there's no opposition, and it appears that it was a part of the file that was sent to the city, city county planning, I think it would be appropriate to accept it. But that's certainly your call as the chair.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. All right, well, we will accept this. We'll add this as part of the record and clarify that. Tom, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And I know you've got a couple of witnesses that you'd like to call on, probably give us a little bit more in depth. But I'll turn it over to you right this moment.
Sure. Let me have Chris Bernardo speak. Chris, could you just describe your position relative to this tower, what your relationship is?
My name's Christopher Bernardo. I'm the manager of national site development for PeakNet. We are the developer behind the tower itself. To address some of the things that I've heard come up, Duke Energy believes that the balloon proposes a significant safety concern for the operation of the transmission substation that's adjacent. In the event that the balloon becomes untethered from the ground or has a failure of material, meaning the balloon pops, there's a chance that the tether could actually fall into the substation, creating a power outage and, again, a significant safety concern. As Tom has previously related, we're happy to do photo simulations from any of the adjacent parcels. We have worked significantly with Terry Sanford Jr., who is the major developer for the area. He is aware of the photo simulations. We have actually done photo simulations from portions of his property during our points of our conversation. And is basically the one that originally agreed to allow us to go to request the variance hearing from the jurisdiction specifically, being satisfied with the photo simulations on his personal level.
Yeah. So Chris, you basically, the agreement with Mr. Sanford because of his concerns was that he needed to be satisfied so far as the appearance of the tower by virtue of photo simulations in order for the variance to move forward.
That's correct. He wanted to see multiple angles. He does want the tower to have as much visual obscurity as possible, understanding that, just by nature of the height, it will be above the trees, but to utilize as much existing vegetation as possible to obscure ground equipment.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And there is, just so everyone is aware, there is a relationship between PeakNet and Duke Energy, correct?
Correct. We are a majority owned affiliate of Duke Energy.
And so basically you develop towers on Duke Energy properties predominantly?
Yeah, essentially we are responsible for facilitating carrier co-locations on Duke-owned structures, meaning their transmission structures, microwave towers, or developing new poles on Duke-owned property. If a carrier comes to Duke to request the development, they are afforded to us to proceed with that development.
And in this situation, carriers come forward wanting PeakNet, who's majority owned by Duke, to develop a tower at this location.
That is correct.
I don't have any questions of Mr. Bernardo, but I'll open, Mr.
Right.
Chairman, have him available for questions from anyone else.
That's a good point. Any questions for Mr. Bernardo? All right, Tom, turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I think
David.
Mr. Paletta has a question.
Yeah, sorry, David.
Um, Mr. Bernardo, wanted to clarify a few things. Do you know what percent of PeakNet that Duke Energy owns?
It's 55%.
Has PeakNet ever constructed any towers on other property owned by Duke Energy?
Yes. Meaning other cell towers owned on like substation property is what you're
Sure.
asking. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Has PeakNet ever constructed towers on property not owned by Duke Energy?
I believe that we actually have a total of 2 in the inventory that are not on Duke-owned property, one of which is actually currently the property underneath is actually being purchased by Duke Energy. And we have one that is currently in development in the state of Florida that is not on Duke-owned property.
How was the location of this tower chosen?
Because of the properties in the area being desired to be developed into industrial complexes, it was one of those things where they actually came to us specifically saying that because of the restrictions of the development area, that the substation represented the best opportunity for development.
Once you got an objection from Duke as to the balloon test, did PeakNet consider any other locations?
No, I would say no, we did not. The advantage to developing on Duke property is that there is already an industrial style use, meaning there are usually towers of some kind in the area. And because of the nature of our business, we do try to develop on Duke-owned property.
And I actually meant, did PeakNet consider any other locations on this particular property?
On the particular parcel?
Yeah.
So when we actually did the examination, because of the shape of the parcel, we cannot go kind of to the northwest. There's not enough room to actually be built there. So the kind of the green area between the road and the substation, that general area is the only area. There is a significant incline on the property itself, on the terrain itself, and the location was chosen was because of those factors, just to not have to fill in anything, and again to use existing landscaping to obscure the ground equipment and the fence and things like that that will have to go around the bottom.
Thank you.
I did have a follow-up question to Mr. Bernardo based upon a question that Mr. Paletta asked. Chris, can you say how many tower sites you've developed in terms of being associated with PeakNet?
New
Approximately.
For monopoles?
We have for monopoles.
Total in the inventory, probably 30, maybe 35.
Okay. And of those sites, how many of those had a balloon test associated with them?
I would say 0, actually, and that would be across the 6 states that I'm in charge of.
It's because those jurisdictions did not require balloon tests as part of the process, correct?
In my experience, yes.
I don't have any further questions
All right.
of this witness.
Okay, you want to move on to the next?
Yeah, I'll move on to Mr. Sampear. Mike, can you give the board an idea of your background and experience? How long have you been doing photo simulations for towers?
I've been doing them for about, since 1992.
Okay. And how did you come about doing photo simulations for towers?
It was with a previous client of mine. I had a computer graphics business at the time, and a fellow came in that was part of commercial real estate, and he wanted to do some tower simulations for For a competitor, I think. And anyway, we got started there and have been doing it ever since.
And so how many tower locations have you done photo simulations for since you started in 1992?
Locations, I'm guessing probably about 1,000, maybe a little less. But each location, there's from 4 to 8 simulations involved. So,
okay. So you've done about 1,000 locations with about 4 to 8 simulations at each of those locations.
right.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to tender Mr. Samper as an expert in terms of photo simulations based upon his experience.
Yes. All right.
Mike, can you just describe a little bit the process you go through in doing the photo simulations for the tower as compared to, say, a balloon test? Just kind of go through that whole process with a balloon versus a photo simulation and the similarities and differences. Go ahead.
Yeah, to start with, the big difference is that the balloon itself, we end up doing simulations with the balloon anyway. It's just that the before images show the balloon in position and height, and this process doesn't have the simulation. I mean, that doesn't have the balloon, but the simulation process is exactly the same.
And describe that process. How do you go through that process to develop the simulation?
Well, it's all about figuring the distance to the tower location and doing a little math on the distance versus your camera, your camera focal length to the lens, to the imager. And you can compute the height in pixels for any given location. The direction and everything is, you can see we rely heavily on the Google Earth satellite imagery and distance. Previously, we used site plans and to do the calculations and such, but it's all boils down to the distance and height and location.
In your time in doing the photo simulations, have you had occasion to actually see tower sites that were built for which you did a photo simulation?
Oh yeah, I've seen several of them, and it's kind of scary how accurate the simulations are.
What are kind of the downside to balloon tests? Can you tell me a little bit about that versus what you can do with, using GPS coordinates and Google Earth?
Well, I've been involved with several balloon tests, and the big issues we have are, of course, flying the balloon above the location. Most of the time, you can't get a clear open space where you can fly the balloon above the location. And I know this ordinance specifies plus or minus a 50-foot radius around the balloon that you can move, but lots of times that's not enough. And in this case, it's definitely not enough because of the wiring and everything else that's involved. And the big issue is windage. You generally, when you get up above 200 feet, or even in this case, that's 180 feet, you'll have a constant wind from one direction or another. It's rare that you have a dead still day unless you get the timing just right and you're lucky. So what that does is it causes the balloon, of course, to drift off location, but it also causes it to go down in height. So it's not, it may be an exciting thing to see the balloon there in the picture, but it's not exactly accurate. And almost in every case that I was involved with balloon tethers, it was like that. It's not an accurate representation. If you went back and compared the actual location with the satellite coordinates and the site plans and such.
Thank you, Mike. So you've, in your time in using balloon tests to do the photo simulations, what type of adjustments do you typically have to make?
It depends on how radical the balloon is off course. Lots of times we'll just fudge it and put the tower in there, but you can see it when you flip back and forth between the balloon photo and the, in the simulated tower location. So mean, the balloon, it'll be bouncing back and forth from where the location's supposed to be.
Okay.
We try not to adjust it if we can, but sometimes the balloon is so far off, you have to make a note on the image or something to indicate what's going on there.
And now, have you been to this particular location?
Oh yeah. Been there 2 or 3 times now.
Yeah. And so you've actually witnessed, you said the wires at the substation, what?
Oh, we got
kind
wires.
of-
Yeah, there's wires going up towards the old cemetery. There's wires going across the road on the east side of where the tower location is. And so if you have any windage that goes, that blows north or west or east, you're going to have an issue with that crossing the wire. So I can see why Duke Energy is kind of getting nervous about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you take photographs to do a photo simulation, walk the board through that process?
Well, I pick out locations. Lots of times I'll use Google Earth's imagery to see where the best angle is of the tower site. And then what we'll do is we'll go out there with the camera and actually get close to that and look at the vegetation and everything else and take the photos. It's just that simple. And I'll generally take 3 photos, several photos of where the location is supposed to be. And then I'll also take 90 degrees and 180 degrees to that location so I can get a real good fix on what the position is for where the camera lens is. The other information you need is, of course, the coordinates of the tower site, which is not going to change. And you can calculate the distance between the 2 cameras. And then from then on, it's just a matter of doing the simple trigonometry to calculate the pixel height in the image.
And so what you're doing with the camera is you have your coordinates at the location where the camera is when you take the picture, and you've got the coordinates of the site, and you use that to compute the height, basically using, I guess, the Pythagorean theorem and looking at your right triangle.
Yeah, it's similar
determination.
Similar triangles. You got the distance to the tower and you got the distance to your imager in your camera, and then the height in pixels and the height in the tower. So it's simple math. It's
okay. I don't have any other questions of Mr. Samper right now, and certainly make him available to the board for follow-up questions.
All right. Another reminder, when we heard this, I know it's been a couple months ago and a lot has happened in our lives and we're back here. But we discussed this. This case was discussed quite at length. And if I remember correctly, everybody was pretty okay with it. But we wanted to hear from the expert, which I guess we've tendered as Mike Samper, and because we wanted to know more about the pictures and how that process was done and why. So I'm going to go back to that. Any questions for this witness? David? You're on mute. I'm sorry, Dave.
If any other board members would like to go first, I would like to defer to other board members. I have a few questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mike Samper? We've heard pretty good testimony, I feel, on that. And now that I know how that worked. David, I'll turn it over to you.
Mr. Samper, what software do you use when you're creating your photo simulation?
Well, the Photoshop is the go-to software for actually creating the simulations. Sometimes I have to use Illustrator to do geometric manipulations, but Photoshop, and then to do the reporting, I use Adobe Acrobat. Okay. Or not Acrobat, it's InDesign, but it allows you to create Acrobat files, PDF files.
Is it accurate to say that Photoshop allows the user to alter a photograph in many ways?
Oh, If it
Let's
wasn't
see.
for that, I wouldn't be able to do the simulation.
Does the view of the proposed tower change with each point where you take the photo?
Yes, it does.
What do you consider to be the main variables that affect the view when you choose a location to take the photo?
Well, obviously the bearing is going to affect it. The distance affects the tower, and then the elevation between the tower and the camera. Those are the main ingredients that you have to consider when computing the height of the tower in terms of pixels in the image.
How did you calculate the distance from your photo, the point of the photo, to the tower?
I use Google Earth. Google Earth has a measuring tool, and they claim an accuracy of less than 0.4 meters the last time I looked. So, and in my experience, their distance measurements are fairly accurate.
So Google Earth allows you to put in the coordinates of your photo location and then will generate that distance for you?
You can measure it with an actual tool.
Okay.
It's like a ruler.
How do you determine the elevation of the land?
Again, Google Earth allows you to measure. It has elevation measurements, and what I do is the difference. So, because the elevation doesn't always agree with the surveyed elevation. I think in this case it did. It was like 330.5 or something like that. And Google Earth was very close in terms of the elevation.
I would like to direct your attention to the photo. Why don't we use the most recent photo that Mr. Johnson showed earlier? I believe it's the last one. Could you pull that one up? No, let's go to the next one. Okay. Can you see that photo?
Yeah.
What is the height of the trees in this photo?
I would have to measure it, but I don't know.
How can you measure the height of the trees?
Well, you can pick the distance from where the camera is to the edge of the tree line, probably is what I would choose. And then you've got that distance, and then you can measure the pixels from the ground, where the bottom of the truck is right there, up to the top of whichever tree you choose. And I can reverse calculate the pixels and distance information to get the actual height to that point in feet or meters.
I'm generally familiar with pixels, but I don't really understand your reference to them. Could you help me understand when you refer to pixels, what you're referring to?
Pixels in the image itself. There's every time you take a digital photograph or the image that you're looking at now, it's composed of so many pixels on horizontally and vertically. Each dot in the image is essentially a pixel, and it's got a color value and an intensity and so forth.
Oh, okay. On this photo, it shows a simulated tower. How did you determine where to put it and how high to put it on this photo?
I calculated the tower height in the normal way. You've got a distance to the location and a distance to the camera. That'll give you the height of the tower. And then the elevation offset between, you can see where the ground level is right there under the truck, and the distance to, or the elevation of where the tower should sit. So that floats the tower up a little bit, looks like in this image. I generally try to do worst case, meaning that if the tower is not visible, I will try and we're close, I'll try and move it in such a way that it is visible. which is probably not the most accurate thing, but I want to give the worst case scenario.
On this document labeled view from location 4, underneath it, it says revision 2022-0611. In the staff agenda packet, that document has revision 2021-0409.
Right.
And in the packet, Mr. Johnson submitted it in a prior, I think it was the first time around, that has revision 2021-0517. Do you know why this view was revised?
The principal revision was in this package, this satellite imagery was updated to March of 2022. So the satellite imagery used in this package is more current than the previous one. The actual imagery and the simulations is pretty much the same. I also added that overlay. If you look at the page 3, I think, or 4, there's a site overlay on top of the satellite imagery I wanted to put in there so you could see how closely a surveyed plot looks compared to the actual satellite imagery of that plot, mapped in at the exact distance or measurements.
Can we go back to that slide, Cole? I think it's slide 2 or 3. There you go. Okay, explain what you were talking about, Mike.
Okay, I put an overlay of the overlay is the actual site plan, and that was surveyed and plotted out in the good old fashioned way with and I overlaid it on this satellite image to show the accuracy actually of what Google Earth was offering in terms of the satellite image. You can look at where the telephone poles are and other features on here and actually determine the inaccuracy of the satellite imagery compared to what was actually surveyed. That was my main reason for putting this in here, to give a good idea of how close everything matched up. There was a question, I believe, about distances and the inaccuracy and so forth. And like I said, the last time I checked, Google Earth was claiming less than a 0.4 meter deviance in horizontal measurements, which is about 1.5 feet.
In your many years of doing photo simulations, are you aware of any standards regarding the creation of photo simulations published by an industry, trade group, or government?
No, not a one.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for this witness before we continue? Cole, would you mind stop sharing the screen for a moment? Thank you. All right. Tom, do you have any other information you'd like to provide?
I really don't, not other than what we have previously supplied. I've had Mr. Samper as an expert explain what he goes through in the process, which was the question from the last hearing 2 months ago. I've had Mr. Bernardo speak specifically to this site and the concerns of Duke and why this site was developed. I will tell you what Mr. Bernardo said, and I've done this for, God, it dates me, but 30 years or more, I've done these cell towers. In this day and time, there are extremely few jurisdictions that require balloon tests. I mean, I've done this work across North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And there are very few that still require balloon tests because the photo simulations are just so good that there's no need for the balloon test. And the balloon test really doesn't give you an accurate depiction of what the tower itself will look like. It's just a rope with a balloon on the top. And as Mr. Samper explained, there's always wind at any given point in time, especially above the ground. And it's rare that it's going to be dead still. So it really doesn't give you an accurate presentation of what the tower will look like. It may give you an idea of the approximate height, but it does not at all give you an idea of the mass of the tower. Here with the photo simulations, we can provide height, we can provide mass, we can provide it in relation to the surrounding topography and the vegetation. And in this case, because Mr. Meadows has raised it, we can give notice to whoever joins and do as many photo simulations as they want us to do from their location, so they can see it, and they can see it for longer than 4 hours and look at it and consider it and think about it and whatever. But it'll also be more accurate. Again, the balloon test, as Mr. Samper said, the balloon may be pushed down, it may be pushed side to side. So we're willing to do that. There's no intent whatsoever to get around due process. We would want to make sure that the property owners were satisfied, that they've gotten enough views from enough locations. This is an extremely important industrial part to the region. We all know how important wireless is to us as a society at this point. There's a need for a tower at this location, and as Mr. Bernardo said, it was chosen because it was chosen to be placed with existing infrastructure that's in the area in order to protect the visibility. So since there's already a transmission or a substation with transmission lines on tall poles, it makes sense to put like infrastructure with like infrastructure, which is why this location was chosen. So I would say in this given instance, and based upon the testimony of Mr. Samper and Mr. Bernardo in terms of the risk and potential risk to Duke Energy lines, and the fact that 50 feet in any direction really would not make a difference with respect to that risk, I would ask that the board please grant the variance. Again, is specific to this site.
Thank you, Tom. All right. Any questions for any or for the applicant or any of today's witnesses? All right. Well, let's bring this to back to the discussion table. Chad, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep it brief. Cell tower, we need them. LI zone, it's appropriate. There's a substation on the site. There's already a major utility in place here. So that seems appropriate. This is a case about a variance for a balloon test, and the balloon test is intended to make sure that the people in the area are notified and are aware about the impacts of this use. Applicant provided a lot of evidence and testimony about the balloon test, and is it sufficient? Is it not sufficient? And I appreciate all that. I learned a lot, and it was very helpful to me. What it didn't do was take away the fact that there's a balloon test requirement in the UDO. I understand and am sympathetic to the comments that perhaps the balloon test might be a somewhat antiquated requirement. And I espouse the notion that perhaps the UDO should be revised to not require this, or at least offer an alternative, so that Mr. Johnson's time, Mr. Samper's time, Mr. Bernardo's time, and our time wasn't spent going through this. From my standpoint, I do think it's an appropriate use. I am concerned about the hardship findings with respect to the variance request. 3148C under the variance findings says the hardship does not result from the actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The hardship, as I understand it, is there's a major utility on this site, and the property owner put that utility on this site. The property owner is not comfortable with the balloon test because it creates the potential for danger. Where did that danger come from? It came from the placement of the utility. And so that's an issue. I'm not sure we talked at all about that aspect. Notwithstanding any of that, the photo sim to me seems to be the applicant's best attempt to reach the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance, which in this instance was making sure that people in the area knew about it. Okay, so we sent out a packet. and folks got a chance to see it. And for me, the real question turns on, is this packet with photo sims in it equal to or meet the requirements of the balloon test and therefore consistent with the spirit of the ordinance? The applicants offered to provide the photo sims to the residents. I appreciate that. I think that wasn't necessary, but in good faith, they've made that offer. The problem is we're asked to make the decision about the variance today. So once the decision's made, whether or not an applicant or an adjacent neighbor knows about the photo sim or not is sort of irrelevant because the decision's already been made. So that's where we are. I am inclined to support the variance, but I'm unhappy with the process that we used to get to it. I feel like our development regulations are not modern as they need to be with respect to this issue. And I hope that the city will explore that, because I would anticipate future meetings with Mr. Johnson at Duke's facilities. And we're going to face the same sets of concerns and same problems. Those are my thoughts about it. And I sure do appreciate everybody's hard work and the extra time that we spent. And I apologize that we had to do that because I feel like we could have sidestepped this had we made some changes to the text of the ordinance. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Mike? Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Chair. As you know, we deliberated on this 2 months ago. I personally want to see, a testimony from an expert on exactly how he got that image. And I think he did a very good job at that. Mr. Sampera, appreciate that. I think that should be a precedent moving forward. Why use that balloon? We have great technology that shows an image into where it stands. So I'm definitely in support of this.
Thank you, Mike. David?
Mr. Chairman, is the public hearing closed and this is limited to our deliberations?
I haven't necessarily closed the public hearing because oftentimes board members have questions after deliberation. So it's not technically closed, but often I did that because sometimes board members have questions of the applicant.
Okay. I would move that we close the public hearing.
I'm not going to do it right now.
When the public hearing is closed, I'll have some additional comments.
All right.
But what I want to avoid, having participated in more than 100 Board of Adjustment meetings, is to get into a back and forth between the applicant and board members. I think that's inappropriate. And until the public hearing is closed, we cannot avoid that.
All right. Anything else? I'll offer some thoughts. I think that this was discussed at length, and I have my notes in front of me from that meeting. Was very well prepared. I was prepared for this discussion, and quite frankly, I think this hearing has taken way too long this morning to accomplish what we wanted to a couple of months ago and what everybody wanted. I think the testimony given today is certainly something. An expert testified on how this has happened. I think this is certainly an acceptable way of doing this. From a balloon test, I've tried to get myself to research this a little bit more and seeing how other municipalities have dealt with this. Tom, the applicant, is certainly an expert in dealing with cell towers and such like this, so I appreciated his perspective. I think this is a no-brainer. Certainly, the location. Where can you go wrong? David, if you feel comfortable, we'll close the public hearing, and if you'd like to provide any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A series of thoughts come to mind. On each case, I try to zero in on what is the key issue. Here, I perceive the key issue to be that Mr. Johnson has made a compelling argument that the balloon test is not the best test available, and the alternative is preferable. However, the balloon test is a policy adopted by the county, and I do not believe, well, clearly, we as a Board of Adjustment do not have the power to amend the ordinance. And that is in essence what we're being asked to do, is to revise the ordinance, do away with this requirement. And I don't think we have jurisdiction to do that. I think it's very clear we don't have jurisdiction to do that. With regard to the 4 findings, I would respectfully disagree with Jacob. On occasion, friends respectfully disagree on occasion. And I would, with regard to finding 1, I don't believe the unnecessary hardship is met. The reason for that is the property owner created the problem, well, created the hardship or problem by having a cell tower. And the reason I asked those series of questions about the relationship between PeakNet and the property owner was to see what is the distinction between the two, because clearly if the property owner creates the problem, then there's no unnecessary hardship. In this case, I believe there's not a sufficient legal distinction between PeakNet. It sounds like a subsidiary or well within the influence. So treating them as, because that distinction was not made, I don't think finding number 1 was met. With regard to finding 2, I don't see any conditions that are peculiar to this property. I don't think that's met. Regarding 3, did the hardship result from the actions of the applicant of owner? Yes, they were created by the actions of the owner. That's undisputed. It won't allow the balloon test. I note that the letter did not give any explanation, and everything else was hearsay. While hearsay is admissible, I don't feel like hearsay is the best evidence, and always prefer the best evidence. Further, the applicant had a remedy. It could have moved the location of the tower farther away from the substation, and I didn't hear evidence that was adequately explored. With regard to the 4th finding, is the variance consistent with the spirit and purpose of the ordinance? I would like a balloon test. I could go out there and look at it, and it would, I'm visual, it would help me decide no problem or huge problem. So as a board member, I think a balloon test would be helpful. More importantly, a balloon test would help members of the public, because they could drive by and see it. If it didn't bother them, fine, no problem. If it bothered them or caused concern in some way, they could ask questions. Without the balloon test, that option's not available. With regard to the photo simulations, I thought Mr. Sampier did a good job. Thank you. He helped educate me. Nonetheless, I see 3 fundamental problems with photo simulations. One is the photo simulations, by definition, are 2-dimensional. A 180-foot tower is 3-dimensional. And a two-dimensional simulation is flawed in representing a three-dimensional object. Second, you can't see the photos, but a balloon you can see driving by. Third, the photo simulations are inherently subjective, and we're dependent on the skill and expertise of the person doing them. For example, it is very important where you choose to take a photo, because there's an unlimited number of potential locations. And by choosing the location, you can influence what it looks like. Also, the number of photos taken is subjective. And on the other hand, the balloon test, it's objective. You see it, it is what it is. For these reasons, I don't think the findings are met.
Thank you, David. Anyone else, any board members? I'll just as a reminder, there's no one here to speak against. This case was heard in April with notice at least sometime in March, was continued to June. Public was well notified and has had multiple opportunities to give input on this particular case. And in April, there was no opposition or anybody in attendance. Here we are, June 28th, and there's no anything, just as a, as a point of reference and reminder. Does anybody have anything else? And if not, would anybody like to provide a motion?
I would like to provide a motion.
All right, Natalie?
I hereby make a motion that application number B22000011, a request for a variance from the balloon test requirement on property located at 5193 International Drive, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. The improvement shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
We have a motion for approval by Natalie Beauchesne. Is there a second?
Kip, second.
Ian Kip on the second. Terry, will you take it away?
Yes. Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
No.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Hushain,
Yes.
Major.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1.
All right. By a vote of 6-1, your request for a variance has been approved. We appreciate you guys coming to several meetings and your patience on this. I know it's been a tough process for everybody. But thank you, and we'll see.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Chad, do you want to go ahead and leave? I don't think we can get through the next case before 10:30.
I think that's probably wise, Mr. Chair. I definitely don't want to be seated and then have to leave midway. So I think, yes, I will sign off and extend my apologies and wishes that I could be part of today's meeting. So I'm very sorry to have to leave early.
No worries, Chad. Good to see you. I appreciate your time.
Here, Rogers, can we have a quick break? I'm in need of. Thank you.
All right, 5-10 minutes. What 5 minutes? Is that okay with everybody? All right. So it's 9:49. Let's come back at 10:55. 6 minutes. Make it easy. All right, we'll be back then.
As we're about to return, if there's anyone who has signed up for the next case, B2216, we will be providing you the panelists to join the commission. Thank you.
All right, as soon as we get Jessica in, Natalie's back, we'll get this thing started. Oh, there we are. Okay, I think we've got everybody. Terry, would you call the next case and clarify the seating?
Yes, it's a city case. It's a request for a variance from the project boundary buffer standards. The property is located at 1011 Andrews Road, is zoned office and industrial, residential suburban 10, and residential suburban multifamily, and it's in the suburban tier district. This case has been advertised for the required period of time. Affidavits verifying the sign postings and letter mailings are on file, and seated for this case is Kip, Pauletta, Rogers, Retchless, Bushane, Major, and Pickett.
Got it. Chris, you got something? No?
Chris Peterson, Planning Department. Is Jim Anthony going to be joining the group today as well? Neil or?
I believe he's on.
Yeah, he's on. I've submitted a panelist request to him. I'm just not getting him to join. There we go. Now we're coming. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Jim, if you plan on giving testimony, we'll need your, there we go. All right, we'll administer the oath. If you'll please raise your right hand, everybody who plans on giving testimony in this case, do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Jim? You gotta unmute, sorry, man. Sorry, sir.
Go. Promoted and unmuted, I do.
All right, Chris?
I do.
And Neil, I don't have to ask you this, but do you consent to the remote meeting platform, Neil?
I do.
Jim?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
All right. Leah, is this one yours or?
Yes.
All right, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Larkins with the Planning Department, and I will be sharing my screen, so you should be able to see shortly. Okay. Again, this is B2216, 1011 Andrews Road, and the applicant is seeking a project boundary buffer variance. Not to repeat everything that the clerk just said, but this project is located at 1011 Andrews Road in the suburban tier. It's a city case. The property is approximately 3.81 acres, and there are no zoning overlays. We'll show the zoning context map here in a moment. The bulk of the property is office industrial, or yes, excuse me, office industrial, or excuse me, office and institutional. And then we'll explore the request. The applicant is requesting a variance from 9.41G2 project boundary buffers. This section of the code allows the project to be exempt from the buffer if it is adjacent to a right-of-way that is greater than 80 feet. The applicant was originally seeking or making the request because the right-of-way was the previous code permitted the exemption with right-of-way was over 60 feet, although the right-of-way in question does not exceed 60 feet or 80 feet. So I'll let the applicant speak to that. The applicant is requesting to construct no project boundary buffer along the right-of-way, specifically for Andrews Road. And the ordinance requires a project boundary buffer along that right-of-way. In this case, a buffer of 60% opacity and 30 feet wide, and to retain the natural buffer on site. Here you can see the aerial map. The subject site is outlined in red, currently undeveloped, and is adjacent to existing established single-family uses. To the northeast, to the north, there is residential urban, residential suburban multifamily, industrial light, and residential urban multifamily to the east, and office and industrial to the southeast and south. So, excuse me, that was established single-family residential to the west, if I didn't say that before. And I'm actually going to go back to the previous map. Here's that zoning context map again. So while this is a split zoned property, you can see that the bulk of the property is zoned OI. I wanted to show that. Here we have an applicant provided graphic showing the required natural buffer. You can see along the northwest boundary, western boundary of the property, it's that 30-foot, 60% opacity buffer. And then we also have an applicant provided graphic showing the project if the buffer variance was approved, where there would be no boundary buffer along Andrews Road. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Leah. Any questions for Leah before we hear from the applicant? All right, Neil, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Larkin, for your presentation. Good morning, Chair Rogers and members of the Board of Adjustment. Point of privilege, if I understand correctly, today is Chair Rogers' last meeting with the Board of Adjustment. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your service, for your, I think, many years at this point on the Board of Adjustment as both a member and the chair, if I recall correctly. So thank you very much for your service. And I wasn't sure if Board Member Major was, I know her term is coming, didn't know if you were returning next year or not, but I'll just go ahead and thank you for your service either way. Anyway, my name is Neil Ghosh. I am an attorney at the Morningstar Law Group at 700 West Main Street here in Durham. I'm representing the owner of the property on this variance request. Also here on behalf of the applicant is Mr. Jim Anthony with the ownership group and Mr. Chris Rakowski, it's a tough one, with TMTLA Associates, which did the land planning for this project. Now, the staff report for this item is a little shaky. For the most part, I think the staff report confirms our position, but I wanted to touch on the two areas where it is a little unclear. First, the staff report suggests that the request is inconsistent with the intent of project boundary buffers. I think this statement misses the whole crux of the issue here. As stated in section 9.1.1E of the UDO, the purpose of these standards is to enhance the privacy and welfare of citizens by separating incompatible land uses. The general character of this area is residential, but the property is zoned OI. The OI district allows several uses which arguably are incompatible with the surrounding residential uses. But that is not what is being proposed here. In the staff report materials, you can see exactly what is being proposed here. Essentially, rental townhomes, a residential use. This is at the heart of the matter. While we argue that the site is difficult to develop regardless of the use proposed, we are not requesting this variance in conjunction with just any use. We are requesting the variance because our use is not inconsistent or incompatible with the surrounding area. So I ask that you keep that in mind as you consider the request. We're not trying to get a variance to build an office building next to a residential area. We are seeking this variance to add much needed housing in an already residential area. In that same vein, I think another relevant factor is that when the property owner purchased the property in 2017, we don't believe a project boundary buffer would have been required along Andrews Road for residential development on this property. It is a change in the UDO since then, which brings us before you today. But I digress. Now, the other item in the staff report I want to address up front is the suggestion that the site could be developed without a variance. We do not dispute that, but that is not the standard at play. In fact, the standard specifically states that it is not necessary for us to demonstrate that without the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. Again, I will refer back to what I asked you to keep in mind. The use we are proposing here may be the most reasonable use for the property given its context in an already residential area. We're not here to debate whether an office building can be built on the property without a variance. I think a better way to frame this aspect of the inquiry is whether the use we are requesting is reasonable and whether it can be accomplished without a variance. Okay, so I think what the UDO requires in this instance is pretty straightforward. Because of the underlying zoning district of the property and its adjacency to residential zoning districts, a 30-foot wide natural buffer is required along the property's Andrews Road frontage. So let's break that down a little bit. This standard is related only to the zoning district, not the use. In this case, OI adjacent to RS10. It would not matter if there was a park on the RS10 property, we still would be required to provide a 30-foot buffer. The inverse is true as well. We would be required to provide a 30-foot buffer if we were proposing to build a neighborhood park on this property. Again, this standard has nothing to do with the use, only the zoning district, which in my opinion highlights the issue in this case. And keep in mind that this property is surrounded on 3 sides by right-of-way. The existing houses we are talking about are across the street. They're not adjacent to the site, they're across the street. So why is this a hardship? In my mind, this also is straightforward. West of the property is Andrews Road, the only road of the 3 which surround this property from which the site can actually take access. West of Andrews Road, across the street again, those are those existing single-family homes. Andrews Road also is where the utilities are. So one way or another, you have to get this site to drain towards Andrews Road. As you move east from Andrews Road, across the property slopes down towards 15501, which is east of the site. In the easternmost 55 to 60 feet of the property, there is about 10 feet of drop towards 15501. This is a significant slope. To put it into perspective, that is more than double what ADA standards allow. It is steep. So the hardship here is that the arguably unnecessary project boundary buffer pushes development on this site onto the steepest, most undevelopable portion of the property at the expense of the flattest, most developable portion of the property. Now, in the staff report materials, you can see the concept plan for the proposed development. You can see that the buffers are provided along the eastern and northern boundaries. What you cannot tell is that the UDO does not require project boundary buffers on any other side of this property except along Andrews Road frontage. Nowhere else is it required. So our request is to eliminate the requirement for there to be any project boundary buffer required along that Andrews Road right-of-way. But our concept here is to provide a similar amount of buffer on other portions of the property, namely the sections which are most undevelopable. This, to me, seems like a reasonable, fair, and just accommodation. The location of utilities, topography of the site, and its shape all are unique factors of the property outside the owner's control. We simply are requesting a variance to get rid of a hardship created by those factors. The fact that we are requesting this variance in conjunction with a residential development is the icing on the cake. Because while this site would be difficult to develop regardless of the proposed use, we are proposing a use which is allowed in the OI district and which is compatible with existing uses in the area. When you grant this variance, everyone wins. We get to use the property, the neighbors get a compatible use, and the city gets more housing. Therefore, we respectfully request your approval. Our team is available to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Neil. Leo, will you put the map back on the screen? I was thinking that it would be kind of helpful to see this as Mr. Ghosh was presenting.
Would you like the zoning map or the aerial map?
The aerial. Just to take a look at it again for a point of reference for folks. All right. Any questions for Mr. Ghosh? All right. Neil, I know you've got a couple of folks here. Other witnesses, are they here just for questions or to provide any additional testimony?
They're here just for questions. I think we've laid out our case fully, and we're happy to answer any questions the board may have.
All right. I'll call one more time. Any questions for the applicant? All right. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application who would like to come forward? And Leah, I'm sorry, we can stop sharing now. I just wanted to take a look at this again for everybody's point of reference. All right, seeing, hearing none. Is there anyone here to speak against this application or request for a variance? All right. Back to the table. I want to ask one more time, any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Discussion. Thoughts on this particular? I'll provide some. I think that, well, David, I'll let you go. Got you on mute, sir.
Okay, I keep forgetting that button. This case raises a question of how much of a zoning regulation does the Board of Adjustment waive to allow the proposed development? That question's come up several times recently. In this case, the applicant would like 100% waiver. I believe Mr. Ghosh has made an excellent presentation, had no questions, which is a good sign that it's clear and concise. I appreciate that. If the board grants the waiver, I believe that we are in effect amending the zoning ordinance. And so I see the remedy to allow this particular development be to get a zoning ordinance amendment that would then do away with this buffer requirement. And I don't believe we have the jurisdiction to do the zoning amendment. Also, buffers are a very useful tool for many reasons. And doing away with all of the buffer between this and the existing residential is not something that would be in harmony with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. So for that reason, I don't think we have jurisdiction to grant the variance.
All right, anyone else want to offer any thoughts? I'll say this is quite a unique site. Perhaps even, very quite difficult to develop anything. I think this, this proposed use and request for a variance is, I think, in line with the area. I'll plan to support. Does anybody else want to offer any ideas, thoughts? Excuse me. All right. Does anyone want to offer a motion? I know we're probably sifting through. Don, I got a question if you're available. Thank you, sir. David brought up a point of a zoning map amendment or such. Do you want to address that? Just that's we're looking at a variance for this.
Sure. I do want to make it clear that I completely disagree with what Mr. Paletta just said. Variances are allowed under North Carolina law. 160D-705 is the state statute that authorizes cities to grant variances from UDO provisions. Section D is the provision that deals with variances. And I think the very first sentence of that section directly addresses the issue here. And what it says is, when unnecessary hardships would result from the carrying out the strict letter of a zoning regulation, the Board of Adjustment shall vary any of the provisions of the zoning regulation upon a showing of the 4 criteria that are identified in the staff report. So this isn't changing the UDO. It's a variance, which is specifically allowed under North Carolina law.
I appreciate that clarification. Any other discussion, or if not, would somebody like to offer the motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right. Major, Jessica?
I hereby make a motion that case number B2216, an application for a variance from project boundary buffer requirements on property located at 1011 Andrews Road, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. The improvement shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
All right, we've got a motion for approval by Jessica Major. Is there a second?
Beauchene, second.
Natalie Beauchene on the second. Terry, I'll let you take it over.
Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
No.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Beauchene,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Pickett,
Yes.
motion passes 6-1.
All right, by a vote of 6-1, your request for a variance has been approved. Appreciate you guys coming before the BOA this morning. Thank you. All right, Terry, you want to call the next case?
Yes, it's a city case and it's a request for a variance from household living parking and driveway standards. The property is located at 1307 North Alston Avenue, is zoned residential urban 52 RU 52, and it's within the urban development tier. The case has been advertised for the required period of time and notarized affidavits verifying sign postings and mailing letters are on file. Seating for this case is Kip, Meadows.
No.
Nope. Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Bushane, and Major.
Yep.
And
All
Pick.
right. Yes. Jacob Rogers, Natalie Beauchene, Ian Kipp, David Paletta, Michael Retchless, Jessica Major, and Chase Pickett. Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Would everyone who plans on giving testimony in this case, please turn your video on? I want to make sure. If you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Chris Tinsley?
I do.
And do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
Yes.
Thank you. Leah, do we turn this one over to you?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, again, this is B2218-1307 North Alston Avenue, a parking and driveway variance request. So with the permission of the board, I've skipped over the site location. It's identical to what the clerk just stated, but I can go back. This property, the applicant is requesting a variance from 10.31A4. All household living requires a minimum of 2 parking spaces. And I want to be clear that the applicant is not requesting to be recused from providing the 2 required on-site spaces. They're specifically requesting relief from the access to those spaces, which is enumerated further in that section of the code. So the site, which we'll see some photos here in a moment, this is an existing site that previously had a single family residence on it. They are requesting to be able to retain the gravel driveway to access those 2 new parking spaces. The existing gravel driveway does not meet the current standards set forth by the Public Works Department, which is a minimum of 9 feet in width. The applicant posits that they would not be able to construct a driveway to the current standards that is 9 feet in width due to features that are unique to the site. So they are requesting to keep that gravel driveway. The ordinance does require adherence to those Public Works design standards, which would be a concrete or all-weather surface driveway with a minimum width of 9 feet for new lots. Here you see the zoning context map. This is a residential property. It's zoned, I don't have that in front of me actually, but it's surrounded by RU52. And then there is RSM to the west and then across Granby Street. You can also see here, this, although it may not be clear in the image, that this is an existing railroad right-of-way. In the aerial, you can see existing single-family homes. This structure has been demolished by permit to make way for the proposed new construction. You can see a Duke utility power line easement here to the southeastern boundary of the property, as well as railroad facilities. This is a crossing beacon that's adjacent to the property. And finally, this is an applicant provided photo showing the guy wires and railroad facilities that create this constraint on the property. You can see an existing gravel driveway. Here you have the guy wires. There's 1, 2, and then there's actually a third one, as well as the railroad crossing facility and then the railroad track. So essentially the applicant is making the point that the hardship is caused by the inability to relocate the guy wires at the direction of Duke Power, and then also the existing railroad facilities. And that's all I have.
Excuse me. Any questions for Leah? All right. All right. Would the applicant like to give us a little information? And Leah, let's while he's doing that, can we put the aerial photo back up just so folks, as he's providing a little testimony and giving us some ideas here that we can have something to look at there. And Mr. Tinsley, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hearing this case this morning. This variance, as Leah stated, is simply just to continue using the lot as it has been used previously. We are not looking to avoid providing parking for the lot. It's simply that a concrete driveway is not feasible due to the guy wires of the Duke electrical poles. There is also another guy wire that was not shown on the photo that extends the opposite direction northward. As you're looking at this photo, it extends northward to the other corner of the lot. The pole also was not shown. There's a telephone pole that sits right about center of the home at the curb. These guy wires take up the entire road frontage of this lot. I did meet with a Duke engineer on site to discuss the possibility of moving the guy wires so that we could meet the code and provide a driveway of concrete that it was at least 9 feet wide. Duke has stated that it is due to the railroad, the constraints of that, it was impossible to move any guy wires. And so that is why we're here today, just simply to request a variance that we are able to use a gravel driveway through the right of way, as has been in use on the property for many years with the previous home. And that's really what we're here today, to just request a variance to have it as gravel going through the right of way and not as concrete.
Okay. I'm not sure if I got a question. I'm not sure, Mr. Tinsley, if it's for you or Leah, but I'm gonna. So if the house that we see on the aerial here, obviously, I heard that it was demolished.
Yes, sir.
If it was still there, you would be using a gravel driveway to access, and that's how it was accessed for, do you know how long?
Many years, decades. Any photo you can go back, you'll see there's never been a concrete driveway on this lot.
Right.
The reason it's gravel is because it cuts through the little bit of the right of way of the railroad, and we cannot put a concrete driveway on their right of way. We can access it with a gravel gravel driveway through the right of way only. A permanent structure such as a driveway is not permitted through their right of way. Once again, we were more than happy to put a concrete driveway within the road frontage of the lot, but due to the guy wires and the pole, that does not leave adequate width or overhead space to maneuver through this area that's, like I said, is completely obstructed by utility poles and guy wires.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Ratchels.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Tinsley.
Good morning.
Have you reached out to the railroad at all about any permissions?
No, sir. We have not reached out to the railroad about permissions. We spoke with Duke, who coordinated with the railroad on the parts about why the guy wires could not be removed. So Duke reached out to the railroad to get the information about the requirements of why the guy wires were there, why they needed to remain there, and that they could not be moved.
Right. I don't know if anybody else can speak. Is this a primary railroad corridor? Is it a less used secondary? Does anybody know that?
No, sir, I don't have any information about the type of railroad it is.
It is secondary. It's very infrequent use, maybe 2 times a week at that railroad.
That's what I would estimate too, being a drive on that road every day. Just wanted to clarify that. I have no more further questions. Thank you, Mr. Tinsley.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Any other questions for, I thought I may have saw, Ian, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks. Yeah. So is the driveway then on the railroad right of way? I'm just looking at this aerial.
It goes through the railroad right of way a little bit. It's not fully on the right of way. The right of way is what you see outside of the orange line on here. So at the road, the first, I would say 8 feet of it pass through the right of way. Then it goes on to the actual property that is not part of the right of way. And that's where we want the parking to be for the property, which is how you see it exactly in this photo here. We would like to use the exact same location for the right of way as a gravel driveway.
Okay. And will the footprint be the same as the previous house, the new house footprint?
The new home, the footprint for the new home slightly varies a little bit. It's a little bit wider at the front section, but as you saw in the photo previously, there's another photo that was shown with the guy wires. There's a third guy wire that extends towards the home. So that prevents us from being able to move the location of the home. That guy wire there prevents us from being able to relocate the positioning of the home or bring that the gravel driveway, angle it further into the home at a closer distance from the road. It has to continue straight until it passes that guy wire.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? Mike?
Yeah, one more question from Mr. Tinsley. Are you going to pick up that gravel driveway and make any kind of concrete driveway? Are you going to pick it up anywhere toward the back?
We could make a concrete parking pad. Once we get through the right of way, we could transition to concrete if that was requested.
What's your plan, Mr. Tinsley?
The plan originally was just to leave it gravel, because if we were halfway into the driveway with gravel, the only thing we're missing here in this picture is the actual parking spots, which would then, it would just, for me to just make it all gravel as opposed to concrete. But if the city requested that the actual parking pad be of concrete, we would definitely comply with that.
And yeah, I've got some thoughts on that, but we'll save it. Any other questions for Mr. Tinsley? All right. Leah, would you mind, this is a very helpful image here, but would you mind stop sharing for a moment? All right, I'll ask the question. Anyone here else to speak in favor of this request for a variance? Anyone here to speak against it? All right. Let's, I've asked about questions, I guess, already for the applicant. Let's bring it back to the table and have some discussion. Anyone want to provide any thoughts that they're having? Mike, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, peculiar, yes, absolutely peculiar to this property. And it's hard, really, when you're in a sliver of land like that. I think Mr. Tinsley has a good case here. I definitely support him putting the gravel driveway in there. There's really not a lot else you can do with it. So that's all I got.
All right. Anyone else? I agree with Mike on this one. This is, it's been a gravel driveway for how many decades? The only reason this is coming before us right now is that there's a new structure. It was going to be a gravel driveway as long as that house was there, so I don't really see an adverse impact to the community or the area. Certainly a peculiar piece of property right there. I don't think that the property owner has gotten themselves into this situation, from their own doing. So we'll support as well. Does anyone want anyone else? And if not, would somebody like to provide a motion? Dave?
I make a motion that case number B 22-00018, an application for a variance from household, living, parking, and driveway standards on the property located at 1307 North Alston Avenue, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the UDO and is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. The improvements shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
All right, we have a motion for approval by Mr. Paletta. Is there a second?
Retchless second.
Retchless on the second. And Terry, we'll turn it over to you.
All right, Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Hushain,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
okay, and Pickett.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, by unanimous vote, 7-0, your request for a variance has been approved. Appreciate you coming for the BOA.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. All right, we've got a couple more cases. B22-00021 is being postponed to next month, or we won't be hearing it. But Terry, would you like to call the next case?
Yes, it's B22-00022. It's a city case. It's a request for a variance from fence height standards. The property is located at 3001 Angier Avenue. It's zone commercial general, and it's within the urban tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and notarized affidavits verifying sign postings and letter mailings are on file. Seating for this case is Kip, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Bushane, Major, and Pickett.
All right. All right, everyone who plans on giving testimony in this case will need to have your camera on to administer the oath. All right. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Ahmed? You got you on mute, sir.
Yes.
And do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
Sorry?
Do you consent to the remote meeting platform?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Leah, is this one yours?
Yes, it is.
All right, turn it over to you.
Okay. Okay, this is Leah Larkins with the Planning Department. The case is B22-00022, 3001 Angier Avenue, fence height variance. This site is located in the urban tier, and it is zoned commercial general. There are no zoning overlays. The property is approximately 0.196 acres, and the proposal is a request for a variance from fence height standards. Specifically, the applicant is requesting a variance from UDO section 9.9.1. In this case, that section of the code requires or limits the height of a fence along the frontage of a corner lot to no more than 4 feet. The applicant is requesting a height of 6 feet. Here you can see the zoning context map. The site is located at the corner of Angier Avenue and Wood Street. It's zoned commercial general. There is commercial general to the northwest and southeast, as well as across Angier Avenue. And then directly adjacent behind the site to the northeast, also commercial general, and then we get into residential urban 5. And finally, here is an aerial map of the site. You can see Angier Avenue, the 4-lane road here at this intersection. You have industrial uses as you travel southwest along Ellis Road, including the railroad easement, and then the subject site is highlighted in red. The frontage that we're discussing here today is this frontage along Angier Avenue. That's the front of the house. Oh, I lost my PowerPoint. Back. The front of the house faces Angier Avenue, and the applicant is requesting to be able to construct a fence up to 6 feet in height along this Angier Avenue frontage. The code does permit 6 feet on the Wood Street, on the side frontage for that corner lot. So we are looking at this Angier Avenue frontage today. And that's all I have. I'm here for questions. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Leah? And Mike?
Yes, sir.
This for Leah. Being that's an intersection, what are the stipulations about fence heights when you're coming to a cross section like that?
So they would have to adhere to the site triangle requirements. They couldn't impede the site triangle. I don't have a graphic to show you, but the site triangle, the concern isn't necessarily the height, it's the location and how far. In this case, it would be how far it's backed off that corner. So that is something that is required by the code, and it's determined that the proposed 6 feet of height would be in compliance with the site triangle requirements, although I'm not an engineer.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Leah before we continue? All right, Leah, would you mind putting the aerial back on the screen, and we'll turn it over to the applicant for any additional thoughts or plans. So Ahmed, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I just need to keep my my fence at the same height now. What it's now, it's 6 feet, and that's for the safety of my kids. And please excuse my language because my English is not that good, so I'm just gonna try to explain as much as I can. The thing is, my house exposed too much to the street and scooping down towards the street, and the train track. Actually, the train hold a lot of traffic in there, and my kids, they don't feel comfortable playing in the yard because everybody keeps looking at them. And I got a 3-year-old daughter that she climbs everything, and I think it's a 4 feet fence. It's not gonna be, good enough for her safety. And also, on the other side is a convenience store across the street, and that's all I need to say. So.
All right, and just to confirm, this fence would be along Angier and Woods. Is that what you're proposing?
It's on Angier Avenue. Yeah, the one they required for me to lower it to 4 feet is the one that facing the Angier Street, Angier Avenue.
Okay, yes, that's what I'm. All right. All right. Any questions for the
Mr. Chair,
applicant?
this is
Hi, Leah.
hi. This is Leah Larkins, Planning Department. I have a photo available if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So this is the fence has been constructed. This is the 6-foot fence on Angier Avenue. And then if I travel, I think it's going to change my view so you can't really see anymore. You can see previously there was a 4-foot fence here, and now there is a 6-foot fence. So this is 4 feet. And then if I travel back here in my Google view, well, if I can get back over there, I don't know if I can, but it's now 6 feet.
Okay.
Chair, this is Jessica Dockery from the Planning Department. I also wanted to clarify that where that 4-foot fence used to be, it wrapped around the corner and went up Woods. That is also required from the front building corner to the street on that side street. So it is from that front building corner back can be 6 feet, but the very front portion is also intended to be a shorter fence as it is along Angier.
Okay, well, that's a good, thank you for that. It makes some interest to this. All right, any questions for the applicant? All right, is there anyone here to speak against, or excuse me, is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone here to speak against it? I remember we've had several cases that are similar to this. The corner lots, safety was a major concern. I can see safety being an issue here. I've driven that road, Angier, quite a bit before I was in downtown and moving. I lived over that way, drove that, took Pettigrew to downtown. I'm very familiar with that intersection. The trains, the cars, there's a lot of trains, a lot of traffic coming through there. So I can understand the desire for a higher fence there in this particular property. So I get that. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say about it?
I just want to clarify that it does not impede the vision of if you're coming out of that side road of Wood Street, I think. I just want to clarify that it does not impede the vision either way.
So you mean, and if you're at Woods, you're trying to turn either way
On
on
Andrew,
Angier
yeah.
and all
I
right.
think it will make a difference if we lower it to 4 feet because the ground it's high already. So if you make it 6 feet or 4 feet based on for cars to turn to the street, it will make a difference. And also the next corner down the street from me, they had a 6 feet fence and they in a better area than me.
Well, here's a question. How far from the street is the fence?
It's like 12 feet.
Okay. From the
And
side.
it's a dead end like that. That Wood Street is not it's a dead end right there.
Okay. Natalie, does that help you? All right. Jessica, do you have some? Ian, I see your hand, but.
I was just going to say that we don't actually have the measurements of that 25 by 25 site distance triangle on the plot plan on the application. It could be at the very edge or just outside of that triangle, but we don't have that measurement to verify for you.
Okay. Ian?
Yeah. Basically, I'm familiar with the site too, having been driven by it many times. This is a very busy spot, as Mr. Najee pointed out. You know, when there is a train going and you can't take a left onto Ellis Road, of course, the traffic backs up. So I think it would be appropriate to have this 6-foot screen as we saw. So I'm comfortable with this.
It's unique. All right, anyone else? All right. Does anyone want to offer a motion on this one? Dave?
I make a motion that case number B 22-00022, an application for a variance from fence height standards on property located at 3001 Angier Avenue, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the UDO and is hereby granted, subject to the following conditions. The improvements shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
We have a motion for approval by David Paletta. Is there a second?
O'Shane, second.
O'Shane, I heard on the first, on the second. Sorry, Ian. Next time we'll get you. Terry, take it over.
Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Bushane,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, by a vote of 7-0, your request for a variance has been approved. Thank you for coming before the BOA this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you.
All right, we've got one more case. Does anybody want a break, or do we want to power through it? Power through it? All right. Terry, take it away.
Okay. It's a county case. It's a request for a minor special use permit for the construction of an addition to a non-conforming structure. The property is located at 1102 Stanridge Drive. It's zoned residential rural, and it's in the suburban and rural development tiers. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and notarized affidavits verifying the sign postings and letter mailings are on file. Seating for this case is Kip, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Bushane, Major, and Pickett.
All right, thank you for that. Would need everybody on? I see. Okay. If you'll please raise your right hand, we'll administer the oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Mason?
Yes.
Erica Sizemore, if you plan to, yeah, we'll need you as well.
Hi, Erica Sizemore.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
And do you consent to this remote meeting platform, Erica?
I consent, yes.
Mason?
Yes.
All righty, thank you. Leah, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. This is case B22-00024, 1102 Stanridge Drive, garage addition, minor special use permit. This site is in the suburban and rural tier, with the bulk of it being in the suburban tier. It is located in the county, and the site is approximately 1.85 acres. It's zoned residential rural, and there is a zoning overlay of the Falls of the New Storden Lake protected area and Falls of the New Storden Lake critical area. The applicant is the property owner, Mason Rappaport, and they are requesting a minor special use permit for the construction of an addition to a non-conforming structure. In this case, an addition to an existing detached garage. Here we have the zoning context map. You can see that the property is zoned residential rural and surrounded by residential rural. This is helpful because you can see the line demarcating the FJA watershed protection overlay. So the bulk of the site is FJB with just the very northern portion in the critical protection overlay area. Here we have an aerial. The existing uses are residential and large tracts residential in the RR zoning district. The proposed addition, if you can see in this aerial, would be to the rear of the existing detached garage. So you can see the primary structure, the dwelling is along the southeastern property boundary. You have the detached garage, and then there's a proposed addition to that garage. And finally, here is a snippet of the plot plan submitted by the applicant showing the location of the proposed addition. And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Leah. Any questions for Leah before we hear from the applicant?
Chair, Rachel's here. I just want to clarify, is this considered an accessory structure? Are we just adding and making the garage bigger, or is this a living space?
Leah Larkin, Planning Department. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Leah. I'm sorry.
The proposal is to add just additional garage space. It's not proposed to be an ADU or dwelling space. So this is additional garage storage space for the required parking on site.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Leah? All right, I'm looking around. Did we lose the applicant? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, right there to the left. Mason, I'm going to turn it over to you. I think it may be best if you're okay. We'll share the script. I'll get Leah to share that image that she just had on that last one, and we'll turn it over to you to give us some thoughts. Yeah, that one right there. Thank you, Leah, on this and what you're planning to do here.
Okay, my name's Mason Rappaport, and I own the house. Just trying to add on to the back of the existing detached garage, about 20 feet addition onto it, which similar to the size that it is now, there would be no change at all from the front, from the street. And there's already a row of trees and shrubbery. There were a couple of photos in my application. I don't know if Leah has access to those photos or if you guys already saw them probably in the application. I mean, that's pretty much all I'm trying to do, just expand the existing detached garage just for more space as a workshop and stuff.
Leah, do you have those photos that we could share on the screen here? Readily accessible, if not, we can.
I do. I have them right here. So I can pull that over.
There you go.
All right, Mason, give us a, yeah.
So that top photo is taken from the street. It's a cul-de-sac, first of all. So the homes are a little tighter up front. That from the garbage can over to the mailbox is pretty much the whole property at the front, and then it goes back in a huge triangle trapezoid shape. The garage that you see on the left, kind of behind that white car a little bit, yep. And there'll be no change. You won't see anything different from the street. about 20 feet added onto the back of it. And then that photo, yep, the bottom photo, that little shed that's there now would come down, and that's where the addition would go.
Okay.
And those trees behind it are then looking towards the neighbor.
All right. Understood. Thank you for that reference. Any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Mr. Kip?
How does this affect the impervious surface? The lot is obviously very large, so it probably doesn't affect, but it is adding some impervious surface. Is that a calculation you've done?
It is, yep, we calculated it, and we'll take up some of the driveway. We'll remove some of the concrete in front of the detached garage.
Okay, so then you'll be very
It's
good. Thanks.
calculated. Yep.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Retchels?
Mr. Rappaport, I understand you're just trying to make a larger garage, maybe a workspace. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, no other questions. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? No? Erica?
Yeah, Mr. Rappaport asked that I speak on behalf of his application to just notate to everyone on this call that as a residential real estate broker in the area, this should not and would not impact any negative value for him or his neighbors, and that many properties of similar structure and development actually sell at a higher sales price. And homes on properties of this lot size frequently have multiple enlarged garages and or workspaces, and do sell and are desirable in our market.
Thank you for that. The board usually first I appreciate your testimony on the how typically these kind of properties sell and how that works. I think that is probably admissible. Usually when we hear about property values, it has to be from a licensed appraiser on that. You touched on it. I don't think it really touched on it long, but I do think that what you said at the end certainly was something that the board can consider. Brian, would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other, anyone else here anyone here to speak against this application? All right, any further questions of the applicant? And I'm assuming, this is one of those things, we're in a neighborhood, so several households had to have received notice about this. They're not here. I'm assuming that there is no opposition to this. These meetings are pretty accessible. Mr. Rappaport, do you want to talk about, and I think it's worth mentioning, your outreach to the neighborhood about this, just to, we can't take anything from you what they said unless there was, they had a written letter or something like that that was submitted part of the evidence. But anything you want to mention about the conversations you've had with your neighborhood?
The two neighbors on either side of me, they weren't opposed to it. They didn't voice any negative thing to me. They, were kind of surprised that I had to go through all this to just add on to the back of an existing garage. That's all we talked about, was basically that,
how the process
was built. The garage was built with the house, and why am I here? Right. That's all we talked about, honestly.
That's totally understandable. And I know that you've probably been in this process for a while too.
It's been a little while.
Okay. Does anyone want to offer a motion?
Retchels, I'd like to.
Mr. Retchels. Oh, hold on. I got to ask. I'm sorry, Mike. I almost forgot. Does the staff, Leah, do you have a recommendation for the group? I forgot. I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it's a special use permit. Yeah.
Startled myself.
Yes, Lee Larkin's Planning Department. Staff recommends approval of this minor special use permit.
Thank you, Leah. Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
I hereby make a motion that case number B22000022, an application for a minor special use permit for the construction of an addition to a non-conforming structure on property located at 1102 Stanridge Drive, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. The improvements shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
We've got a motion for approval by Mr. Retchels. Is there a second? Ian?
Yep, second.
There you go. Terry, take it away.
Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Hushain,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, by a vote of 7-0, your request for a minor special use permit has been granted. Really appreciate your time and patience through this. I know you guys have been in this process for a while. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So our next item on the agenda, no, I don't see any old business on here. We've got a few things on the new business. We've got some things that on here now, the elections, but I want to bring up the issue that David mentioned earlier. David, certainly a conversation we got to have. I know that you and I have emailed back and forth and had some communications. I think that you and Jessica have probably had. I know you're wanting to see, basically you want to see some of this more in the packet. In person, it's very common for us to get resumes, even market evaluations or appraisals the morning of, and it be, and sifting through it. I know it's not the practice that we like in the virtual world, and even some rules. And Jessica, I don't know if anybody wants to address this any further, but I'm bringing it up.
Chair Rogers, I don't think this is the appropriate venue for that conversation, but I'll be glad to have a conversation with anybody that would like to discuss it after the meeting.
I actually agree. David?
I've been on the board for 6 months. On 3 of those 6 months, there have been documents submitted that were not available for me to review. I've raised this question with staff twice. Today is the 3rd time. My question is, what is and specifically with Jessica, and it happened again since our interaction, what is the proper venue to discuss this? I would like to discuss it in whatever the proper venue is.
I'll be glad to have a phone call with you after this meeting if you would like.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on here is the election of officers. These are 1-year terms. I've been chair for the last 3 years. I think we're going through the virus. I think I was elected in June of 19 and led us through where we are today. My term ends June 30th. So we've got 2 elections, got election of chair, need election of vice chair. The way this works is anyone can make a nomination, a vote is taken, and that's how that works. It's for a year, 1 year. Anyone want to throw out some options or actually any discussion on this? Or any nominations?
I'd like to, Retchels here, I'd like to make a nomination, Chad Meadows be chair.
So I think that's going to be problematic since Chad is not present.
So would he, as vice chair, be at the next meeting as chairman?
Well, you're voting on the new chair and vice chair today. So you would be voting on whoever that's going to be, but he wouldn't be able to accept because he's not there. I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but Robert's rules would dictate.
David?
Today is my day to respectfully disagree with some of my friends, and or at least I want to explore this with Brian. I was thinking Chad was a logical chair.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. Either you postpone the nominations if you choose to do so. You can do that until he's present. You know, perhaps there's some electronic means of contacting Chad, and he could accept the nomination. But I don't see how he can be nominated if he's not present to accept the nomination.
Would it be helpful, if I reported a conversation I had with him on this topic?
The topic of him not being present?
The topic of nominate. I wanted to get his permission to nominate him. I didn't want to, and he gave me his permission. Is that helpful?
I think it's helpful. I think that we're all very familiar with Chad, and he's done a very good job. I don't think there's any, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I just know that he has to accept the nomination. That's the only technical issue. So if you want to hold that open until the next meeting, you certainly could do that.
Well, how about this, Brian? What if we elect vice chair today? Can we do that?
If the person you nominate is there,
yeah,
is there, you sure can. No problem.
I would. I'll make a nomination for vice chair for Michael Retchless.
You need a second?
That's another thing, Brian, 3 years ago when we did this, was it a motion or was it just a nomination? They accept the nomination and we kind of vote down the line.
It's just a nomination and an acceptance.
Okay.
And then if he accepts, then you vote.
All right. Mike, would you accept that nomination? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Put me on the spot, Rogers.
I do that.
Yeah, I'll accept vice chair.
And let's just go down the line. If you do want to vote for Mike, and if Mike is elected vice chair, Brian, could he lead the meeting on the next meeting and for the election for chair, and then if we forego the meeting of chair?
Right. So that's an option.
Yeah.
But you have to, what you have to do is you have to open nominations and then close nominations. And so there may be other people that could potentially be nominated.
That's right.
So Mike is one of the people. And so I would just suggest that you leave it open for additional nominations.
All right. And vote at the next meeting?
No, you can vote today. You would just, if nobody else has a nomination, you would close nominations for vice president and then vote on it.
That makes sense. I'm sorry, I wasn't following it first. Does anyone else want to make a nomination for vice chair? All right. Well, let's vote on this. Everyone, all members vote on this, even alternates who aren't seated. So George, you will be voting on this as well. Natalie, will you go down the line and everyone present vote on this?
Sure. George?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
No, do you get to vote?
I'm not citing Natalie. I meant Terry.
Oh, okay.
I was looking right at you, Natalie. I am so sorry.
But you were doing a good job, Natalie. You were doing a good job.
They're going to
I'm
hire
going
you.
to let
as
her
a
take it
part-time.
away. Okay, Kip.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
Coletta.
I vote for Michael Retchless.
Okay, Rogers.
Yes.
Retchless. Can he vote on himself?
Sure can.
Okay. Shane.
Yes.
Major.
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
And Colossus.
Yes.
All right. That motion passed, or that passes unanimously. Welcome, Mr. Vice Chair, as of July 1st. Congratulations, Mike. So I guess the way we'll do this is we'll postpone the election of chair to the July meeting. Brian?
Yeah, so you could just hold that open.
Okay.
Hold the nomination for chair open until the next meeting. And then the vice chair would chair the meeting for the purpose of nominating, the chair. And then once the chair is nominated, then they would just switch.
Got it. All right. We will do that. Then we'll hold that open until the July.
Now, unless just to cover all the bases, unless someone else has a nomination they want to make for chair other than Chad.
Well, let's have that open. Is anybody are there any other nominations for chair? Don't be afraid.
Did you have to wait for Chad and just Chad has a different nomination? I don't know if that matters or not, Brian. Okay, I'm saying you're asking if anyone else has nominations for chair. Can Chad not make a nomination himself for someone else if he wants?
Yeah, that would be done. That would be done at the next meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Hey, Jessica.
Hi. I don't know if Mr. Kip would be willing to accept, but I would nominate him to be chair.
All right.
I respectfully decline, but thank you.
All right. Well, there you go.
All right. No more nominations. We'll hold this up into the July. I think it's the 27th, 28th. Sorry, I don't have that date certain. 26th, 19th. I don't know. Which one is it? It's 26th.
July 26th.
That's right. I've taken it off my calendars. I'm sorry, folks. Don, did you have something? I want to make sure we're in.
I was just curious. I would assume that the board might want to vote on the chair at the beginning of the next meeting.
Yes.
And I was just curious if the board wanted to reorder the agenda now so that's ready to go for the next meeting, and then staff can prepare the agenda that way.
I was kind of assuming that would happen. So yeah, let's make that happen. David, do you have something? I got you on mute again.
I have one more item of new business. Are you finished with the agenda?
Not with the agenda. We still have the approval of orders.
Whenever you're done, I would like to add a new item related to the appreciation, a motion for appreciation of the folks going off the board, but let's save that to the end for the board's consideration.
Okay. All right, so we've elected a vice chair. We're pushing the election of chair to the July 26th meeting. Let's start. Is there any other new business? David, you want to do it now?
Is this the right time? Well, sure.
I would have said new business.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start with your question. Is anyone going off the board besides Jacob? Are we losing anybody else?
Jessica Dockery, planning staff, not at this time. Everyone else that had a term that was coming up has renewed and been approved.
Wonderful. So before we let Jacob go, I think we ought to recognize and express our appreciation for many years of service. And the chairman does more work than all of us. And it's a heck of a lot of responsibility to try to juggle all of our personalities. There's a few personalities on the board, at least one, maybe a few. And, you know, he's put in countless hours for many years. It's really selfless. It's the ultimate in public service. And I would like to move that we adopt a resolution thanking Jacob Rogers for all the years he's put in and express our appreciation and gratitude for his public service.
I really appreciate that, David. I've been on here for 6 years now, and 3 as chair. I think my first 3 were an alternate, so I went from alternate to chair. First 3 were I think I sat on at least 90% of the cases, just because we were always missing a board member, some issues. The time, you know, you guys don't ever miss a meeting. There was a time where it was really tough to, you know, get 7 people at the table, and we were wondering if it was going to, waiting 10 minutes for that last person to show up. But y'all have been super easy to work with, and I've learned a lot in this role. It is a big time commitment, but I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good time.
So was that a formal motion, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a motion on the floor.
Okay, motion on the floor.
Needs a second.
Shane, second.
All those in favor of honoring the king?
A resolution of appreciation and gratitude.
Appreciation for all those leaving the board, which would be Jacob, which I think is well deserved. Right.
Aye.
Everybody, unanimous.
Unanimous. Wow.
Unanimous. I would like to add, you know, I've represented this board probably 10 years now. I was there when Mr. Colassa was the chair a long time ago, and then the fellow before him, and then the person after him, and you know, Jacob. And I will say that, Jacob, you probably had the most trying period of time to actually be the chair of the board, because there were challenges that no one else had to deal with. You know, I think you did, like I said before, a great job at balancing the interest of applicants as well as the public. I think the board will certainly miss you and your knowledge. And you know, hopefully sometime in the future you might see fit, like Mr. Colassa, to come back for some more punishment. So I would say, you know, job well done, my friend. Job well done.
Thank you, Brian. That means a lot. Thank you.
I'd also like to say thank you, Jacob. You know, when we came together and nominations and voting in, I was the deciding vote. You remember, between you and Chad, and you know, I went with my heart, my gut, and you've definitely proven to be very effective with the Board of Adjustment. And thank you for these, you know, these the times of COVID and doing this had to be very difficult to keep this all together. And I just want to show my appreciation and thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, you were the deciding vote. I remember going around the room, and I was sitting right beside you. I went, and then you went, and and it was a 4-3 vote. It wasn't an easy vote, so thank you for that. All right. Well, we'll move forward here. We got some orders. Need a motion and a second for each one. We got to call everybody. I'm assuming that 11 and 16 we won't be voting on today, since there was a no vote. Is that true?
That is correct. Could we also start with B 2022? That is the green flea market order that is not on the list, and that way we won't forget.
Yes. Well, it is on the list, on the agenda. Is that what you mean?
B 2022 is not on the list.
All right, so B20, and who is eligible to vote on this?
Not I.
Anyone that was present, Ian Kipp recused himself. And so whoever was seated in his stead would be able to,
I think that was Tarrant, who is not here today either. So it would be the rest of y'all.
So
And Chad is also missing.
That's right.
So do we still have a quorum?
Paletta, me, Beauchene, Mike, Retchless, and I think Jessica. No, Jessica, you weren't. That's right, you weren't.
Chase.
So
Chase
Chase.
Pickett.
All right, so we'll so those, I guess those 4 of us. Is that still enough?
was it a full complement? Was it 7 people?
We had 7.
And there was, but there were only 6 that voted. Yeah, Paletta voted against it.
Okay.
Paletta voted against it. So you only had 6. And so you would need a majority of the 6, which means you would need 4 people.
Okay.
So
we
it's
don't have it.
gonna have to wait.
All right, unfortunately. Sorry, Jessica.
That is all right. We will put it on the next agenda.
Y'all are so flexible. All right, so the one we have now is B22000018. It was a unanimous vote by the folks on here. 18, let me look at that. Okay, yeah, it's everybody here. So Terry, I'll let you take it. Oh, I need a motion. Anybody want to make a motion for approval of this order?
I move to approve Retchless.
All right, Retchless on the first. Who's on the second?
Paletta second.
Paletta second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Beauchene,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Pickett.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All righty. Our next one is B22000022. Again, unanimous vote. Everyone who can vote on this one. Is there anybody want to make a motion to approve?
Retchless for move.
All right, Retros on the first. Anybody second?
Beauchene second.
Beauchene on the second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Beauchene,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
and Pickett.
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
All right, one more, guys. We're almost out of here. B22000024. Is there a motion to approve?
Retchless motion.
Retros on the first.
Kip second.
Kip on the second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Beauchene,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
and Pickett.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, guys, that ends our agenda for today. We got out of here before noon. Really cool. Next meeting is July 26th. I won't see you there, but I wish you all the best of luck.
And as a reminder, it is in person again. Yes.
In person.
City Hall or the second floor?
It will be in the second floor committee room. We did originally have the city council chambers, but they have adjusted one of their meetings, so we have been bounced. I guess you can't fight city council.
They say you can't fight City Hall, huh? All right, guys. Well, we'll see you all then, or you'll see you all then. I hope you have a good rest of the week and a good 4th. Bye-bye.
Bye.